The Fort Erie Podcast with Brent Jones. Brent Jones starts now.
Hello and welcome. This is episode 83 of the Fort Erie Podcast. I'm Brent Jones. It's Tuesday, February the 13th. At least to you, it's Tuesday, February 13th. I'm actually recording this episode a few days before it's released. So by now, dear listener, you know who won Super Bowl 58. I still don't know at the time I'm recording this. I have a feeling Kansas City is going to pull off the win, but I don't know right now. I don't like either team, so I don't really care. I just hope it's a good game this Sunday, and I hope you, dear listener, I hope you had a great Super Bowl weekend. My guest today, I'm going to be speaking with Courtney Garrow, owner and operator of Ginger Tail's Pet Service. That's coming up. We're also going to be getting into some Fort Erie job leads today. If you're on the hunt for a new job, some Fort Erie questions and answers, and a brief look at an event in Fort Erie history, probably not our proudest moment, a bit of an unsettling story from the Crystal Beach Amusement Park back in 1956. We were going to talk about it. But I thought I would start today's episode with, I don't want to call it a review, let's say, but I'll share with you a meme that I saw floating around on social media. I saw this come up on Facebook a bunch of times. A lot of you around town shared this. It's a meme titled, "Things People Do in Small Towns." And I know Fort Erie is rapidly becoming less and less of what some might call a small town, but I think some of these items probably still apply here. And hey, if you're listening from a small town that isn't Fort Erie, call the Byrd Box, 289-599-2973. Leave a message. Let us know if these items apply in your small town as much as they might right here in our town. Anyway, first item on the list, things people do in small towns. Number one was drive around. Is that a thing? A lot of people do drive around small towns, looking for something to do, maybe some trouble to get into. Sunday drives, maybe. I know my wife and I do that sometimes. We can put the iPad on for our daughter. We can get some coffee. I thought we just did kind of the Sunday drive thing because we're boring people. I didn't realize that's a thing that a lot of people do. But hey, number two on the list is eat at the same two restaurants. I know everybody's got their favorite couple of restaurants, places they like to go out for dinner. But I find this is just increasingly the case with having a toddler, is that we pick the same two restaurants where we know there's something on the menu that she's going to eat, that we know that there's a high chair when we get there. Number three on the list of things people do in small towns is drive around more. I think this might be, maybe this is becoming less common with gas prices the way that they are. Maybe you got an electric vehicle, I don't know. But I think most of us who are still paying for gas, I don't know how much driving around we're doing these days. Number four on the list is go to a town that is slightly bigger. We definitely all do that in the town of Fort Erie, whether it's Buffalo or Niagara Falls. It's the joke if you live in this town, you're 20 minutes away from everything, right? So going to a town that is slightly bigger, that's definitely something we do in the town of Fort Erie. Next one on the list, make a bonfire. Yeah, I feel like a fire pit or making a bonfire, that's one of those things that just comes in the small town starter kit. When you live in a small town, you got to have a fire pit in your backyard. You've got to have a beer fridge in your garage. You probably need a good setup as well for playing cornhole, at least when the weather's a bit warmer. I'm surprised ripping around on your ATV isn't on this list, if I'm being quite honest. And the last item on the list, things people do in small towns, it says, call a friend to see if they want to drive around. Yeah, it could be a social activity. I get that. One thing I know for sure is that if you drive around our town for long enough, you're almost certain to see somebody that you know out and about doing their thing. You can stop and say hi. I think if you're really looking for somebody you can stop and say hi to, my suggestion is maybe take a drive over to the Tim Hortons in Crescent Park. That seems to be one of the main hangouts in town. Anyway, let's get right into today's episode. Let's start with a look at what's coming up in this Thursday's edition of the Fort Erie Observer.
Coming up in the Fort Erie Observer.
In partnership with the Fort Erie Observer, I'm able to share with you a sneak peek of what's coming up in this Thursday's edition, being delivered straight to your mailbox. For starters, there's going to be a featured story about Les Lakewood, friend of the Fort Erie podcast. He's the owner of Little Red Coffee, and the story goes like this. He almost had to close his doors after his lease was up for renewal. He got notified that his rent would be increased by a pretty significant sum, and the point of this story, the point of this feature is that Les demonstrates that keeping a cool head and Taking a look at both sides of the coin type approach, learning his rights, he was able to negotiate a deal that enabled him to keep his shop and his doors open for his customers. Then there will be a story on the Burt Miller Nature Club. They're trying something different, asking residents to join in and accept the Earth Challenge. This is basically a challenge to just do something, anything to help our Earth. There's a different theme for the challenge every month this year, along with prizes. At the end of the month, February's challenge focuses on environmentally friendly eating. So a few examples include reducing food waste, making a plan to use up your leftovers, composting, using your green bin properly for food waste, and donating to a food bank when you can. There's going to be a story this Thursday's edition of the Fort Erie Observer about a brand new column, a new feature the Observer is trying out, Youth Talk, looking for young voices to share their thoughts with the Observer, looking for young people around our town to share their thoughts, concerns, ideas, something fun and entertaining, sharing their perspectives with the Observer. 500 words or less, and photos, of course, are welcome. You could send an email if you are interested in participating, or I guess if your kids are, send their submissions to Jen Wilkinson. That's Jen with one N, Jen Wilkinson at forterieobserver.ca. And lastly, another new feature that the Observer is trying out is called Journey Through Time. And this revolves around the Fort Erie Heritage Arts Sports Gallery. That's a mouthful, but that's the sports gallery at the Leisureplex. Anyway, you can embark on a nostalgic journey, it says, with Bill Reed and the Fort Erie Heritage Arts Sports Gallery through a collection of photos, moments, events, and personalities from Fort Erie's rich sports history. So basically, the idea here is that Bill is going to be providing the Observer with some old archive photos along with a bit of info about them, kind of the who, what, when, where, why, all that type of thing. The Observer will be sharing those memories with readers and then inviting them to share their own memories of those specific events. You'll have to check out this Thursday's edition of the Fort Erie Observer for all the details. It's going to be headed straight to your mailbox in just a couple of days.
This month in Fort Erie history.
For this edition of This Month in Fort Erie History, I'm going to do something a little bit different. Usually what I'll do is I'll say, hey, it's the month of February. Let me pick a historical event from our town that happened in a February past and tell you all about it. But because February is Black History Month, I thought I would do things a little bit differently today, because I'm seeing a lot of articles popping up this month, a lot of pieces from different publications focused on the Underground Railroad and the role that Fort Erie played in the Underground Railroad, helping escaped slaves, acquire freedom, helping them cross the border, start a new life. And I think people in this area, and probably all of Canada, we tend to think of that era as all good news. Enslaved African Americans would find their way across the border. They'd live happily ever after. But that most certainly was not the case. They might have found freedom, at least in, according to the letter of the law, but escaped slaves who made their way to Canada still faced immense hatred and discrimination everywhere they went. I think Canadians as a whole, we tend to think of anti-Black racism as a uniquely American construct. We think of the Jim Crow laws of the South in the 1960s, the phrase separate but equal. We think about segregated schools. We talk about, they had separate bathrooms and separate water fountains. And we think of ourselves here in Canada as righteous and superior. We tend to think of the North as a whole, including our neighbors in New York State and elsewhere along the border. We tend to think of the North as this progressive, welcoming, open-minded, tolerant people. But that is certainly not the case. History does not bear that out, and certainly not in the town of Fort Erie. I'd like to take you back, not to the days of the Underground Railroad. I'd like to take you back to 1956. Crystal Beach was then its own town, its own village. I mean, Crystal Beach did not become part of the corporation of the town of Fort Erie until 1970, but Crystal Beach was at the time predominantly white, still is today, but especially so back then. Through the 1950s, Black Americans and Canadians started to travel to Crystal Beach to enjoy the Crystal Beach amusement park, and they were often treated very poorly. And I know some of you listening who've been in Crystal Beach a long time, your family's from Crystal Beach, you're immediately going to get defensive about no, everybody was always welcome here, everything. Okay. I'm reading an article here from University at Buffalo, and it tells a story about a race riot at the Crystal Beach amusement park back in 1956. The article goes like this. It says, in 1956, the simmering ill will precipitated a riot that began with gangs of Black and white teenagers, male and female, throwing bottles, assaulting people, and terrorizing one another in the amusement park along the adjacent beach and later aboard the Canadiana, a boat that ferried up to 3,000 passengers at a time from Buffalo to Crystal Beach. The author says a number of people were injured in the melee and youths of both races were arrested. The event was followed by a public debate over juvenile delinquency that masked the fact that the uprising exemplified a profound racial struggle over public space. Exactly. Nothing about the root cause of the hatred that incited these events was addressed. It was swept under the rug, largely by the public, as just an instance of juvenile delinquency. Kids being kids, assaulting each other, throwing bottles. What do you want us to do? Okay. Now remember, I said this happened in 1956. I just want to add some context. My father was born in 1953. My mother was born in 1955. I'm talking about an era. I'm talking about a time that I personally am only removed from by one generation. So some of you listening right now were alive when this happened. Some of your parents and grandparents, I'm guessing, were on the wrong side of this battle. In retrospect, I've got another article pulled up here from TVO that tells the story about Black Toronto students. Toronto students, I should say, and there were a couple of Black students among them who organized a trip by bus to Buffalo in 1959 for a dance party. So they passed through Fort Erie, heading to Buffalo for this dance party. Here's what this article says. This was for a show, by the way. It says here, to some viewers of the May 23rd, 1959 broadcast of Dance Party, that was the TV show, it says 2 Toronto teenagers had traveled down the QEW to commit an offensive act live on Buffalo television, an offensive act. The show received at least 8 calls complaining that a black boy and a white girl should not be dancing together. The host of the show decided to placate the callers. Rather than telling them to buzz off, decided to placate them. The article says, after all, the kids from up north should have known better. That's what the host later suggested. They should have followed the old adage, when in Rome, do as the Romans do. It continues, student council members at Toronto's Malvern Collegiate sensed that most school social events were geared towards senior grades, so they'd organized a bus trip of their own to Buffalo for younger students to appear on Dance Party. And among the 46 students who went was 15-year-old Clayton Johnston, who played trumpet in the school band and had won several track trophies. According to the Globe and Mail, Clayton and his sister Carol, they were the only 2 black students at Malvern at the time. So the trouble began, it says, during the Spotlight dance segment. Clayton was paired off with another 15-year-old, Patty Banks, and the phones lit up immediately with complaints about the interracial couple. The host decided to approach one of the chaperones and suggested it would be a good idea if Clayton, this black student, no longer appeared on camera. That was 1959. Guys. So why do I share these stories this month in Fort Erie history? Well, I think sometimes, for starters, we forget how far we've come. But I also think sometimes we're blind to how far we still need to go. Because it wasn't that long ago that the overwhelming majority of the public would have taken issue with my marriage. My interracial marriage to a black woman who was born in Miami and raised in Atlanta, a time where my daughter, a mixed child, might not have been welcome in certain social circles. So it's Black History Month, folks. And my thought is this, before we spend too much time patting ourselves on the back about Fort Erie's role in the Underground Railroad, noble as it might have been for the time, it might be worth remembering that it was the very least we could do. And it would take many, 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 many more decades before we'd start to begin to tackle what we really ought to be doing.
It's Fort Erie's answering machine, the Byrd Box.
Welcome to the Byrd Box. This is a recurring feature on the Fort Erie podcast where I play voicemail messages that you have left. I call the voicemail service for the Fort Erie podcast the Byrd Box because the last 4 digits spell BYRD. I did not get to pick the number. It was the only thing I could spell with the last 4 digits. Call 289-599-BYRD. Leave a message. I'll play it here on the Fort Erie podcast and respond to it. Now, I got a couple of messages, a couple new messages. I'm just going to play one for today. This message was left. It was left last week, but it is topical. It's a response to the ranting and raving segment from last week's episode 82 of the Fort Erie podcast regarding Taylor Swift being at the Super Bowl. Have a listen.
Stop being mad at Taylor Swift. Listen, I am not a huge Swiftie. I can name like 5 of her songs, okay? But the girl has done no wrong, okay? She is so normal. You know, she's easy on the eyes. Yeah. She's easy on the political takes. Last time she had a controversy was never. And so what? Now she's dating a football player and all the women are into football. That's great. You've got another excuse to put it on the TV. So just shut up and take the blessing when it comes to you, you know?
Yeah, some people just aren't that clever, man. They aren't clever enough to take the blessing as it comes to you, so to speak. It's but look, this caller's absolutely right. That was my take too last week, episode 82. Look, I don't know how you could avoid. I don't know how you could avoid the news, like having Taylor Swift at Kansas City Chief games. I don't know how you could avoid that. I mean, you've got quite literally the biggest celebrity in the entire world, the most recognizable pop star who's currently on a tour in Asia. You know, most recognizable celebrity in the world, dating arguably the best tight end in NFL history. I mean, this is going to make news, and they are going to pander her every now and again. But having a bunch of grown men getting upset because women and girls are suddenly taking an interest in football, that's silly, man. That's silly. Get over yourself. Anyway, anything on your mind, anything you want to respond to, if you got a joke that you want to tell, if you want to get something off your chest, if you just want to hear your voice on this podcast, any reason you want, 24/7, 289-599-2973. And coming up right now is going to be my chat with Courtney Garrow at Ginger Tails Pet Service.
Have something you want to squawk about? Let the whole town know what's on your mind. Call the Byrd Box at 289-599-2973. That's 289-599-BYRD.
All right, I've got Courtney Garrow on the phone. Courtney, how you doing?
I'm well, Brent. How are you today?
Hey, I'm great. Thanks for joining me. I appreciate you making some time. Now, you are the owner and operator of Ginger Tails Pet Service. What's that business all about? What is Ginger Tails up to?
All right. So Ginger Tails, we're actually a pet service that caters to kind of all kinds of services regarding in-home pet care. So we provide pet sitting, dog walking, pet taxi, yard cleanup, dog park trips. So basically everything is mobile. So we would go into the client's home. So there's no boarding involved, which basically means that your pets get to stay in the comfort of their own home while getting fantastic pet care. Oh,
that's great. Okay, so you're not in the you're not in the training or obedience space. Let's say you're not in the grooming space. You're looking for people who need to give their pets some extra attention. That's where you come into play.
That's exactly it. Yes. So dog obedience and dog training hopefully will be in the cards in the future. But at this time, it's basically just a little extra attention for your furry pals.
Oh, that's great. Are we talking, we're talking cats and dogs, I assume, but is there any sort of limitation on what types of pets you'll work with?
Absolutely not. I have had pets of all sorts. So birds, parrots, lizards, snakes, goats, horses. Yeah, you name it. I've been there, done that.
Get out of town. So
I've got it. Yeah.
Somebody with a horse will actually say, hey, come hang out with my horse for the afternoon.
Oh my gosh, what a treat that would be. So yes, absolutely. So I cater to all kinds of furry friends.
When did you get Ginger Tails started?
So I've recently actually just moved back here from overseas, and that was at the beginning of September, and I launched Ginger Tails around mid-October.
Oh wow, so fairly recent.
Yes, we're still quite new in the community.
What has the response been like so far?
Oh my gosh, the response has been fantastic. This is a fabulous community to be a part of, and so business has been great so far, and obviously it's building. But the response so far from the community has been fantastic and supportive, and I cannot tell you how grateful I am to be a part of it.
Well, if Fort Erie is a great place to be, that is for sure. Now, were you born and raised in this area?
In this area, no. I was actually born and raised in Bowmanville, which is on the other side of Toronto. I lived in Toronto for about 13 years, and then I have been living abroad for about 10 years.
So what brought you to this neck of the woods? Because your story, by the way, kind of follows mine. I grew up in Durham region. I was born and raised in Oshawa, and then made my way to Toronto, and then finally made my way down to Niagara. So I'm curious about your story.
Who is that?
Yeah.
We probably have some friends in the same circles.
I wouldn't be surprised, tell you the truth.
Yeah, that's amazing. So what brought me here? My parents made the move out here about 12 years ago. And obviously, like when I had breaks from work, I would come back to visit for maybe a couple weeks at a time and thought it was a great area, started meeting people in the community. And just when it came time to make the decision to move back to Canada, it was kind of a no-brainer. Like my family is here and I've really enjoyed all of Fort Erie, actually. It's a beautiful place to be.
Oh, I agree, for sure. Now, have you, I am curious, with starting this business in particular, have you always been sort of entrepreneurial in one way or another, or is this something brand new to you, running your own business?
Well, this adventure specifically, entrepreneurial, sorry, my pronunciation isn't fantastic.
It's a tough word.
It's a new venture for me. Obviously, like over the years, I've had heaps of ideas just coming and going, and nothing really motivated me to the point where I wanted to pursue. And then I started thinking about this industry and what I really enjoy spending my time doing, and this kind of popped into my brain and I just ran with it. So here we are.
Well, that's great. I mean, it's always nice when a business idea stems from a love of something. You have a love for animals, and it was a natural extension for you to do this. But I think there's a business case for it as well. One of the regular features that I do on the Fort Erie podcast is Fort Erie Questions and Answers, which is based on the Facebook group by the same name. And people are routinely asking, hey, is there anybody who does pet sitting? Is there anybody who does dog walk? Those questions come up all the time. And although we have a lot of services in town, say for purchasing pet food or for grooming, I don't know that there's a lot of people doing what you're doing. Is that a fair statement?
I think that's a fair statement. I know of a few other sitters and walkers in the area. But again, Fort Erie is growing, and there's going to be a demand for everybody who's got a dog, everybody's got a cat, everybody's got this love for animals that I think, taking it above and beyond and offering new services, I think that's what's going to kind of really fire up. And yeah, so I think it's not necessarily a unique service that I offer. But again, there comes into play, demand. Well,
for sure. I think there's a lot of demand for it. And with demand sometimes comes, a hefty price tag. I believe your website covers all of your costs for the different services you offer. But if I, for instance, wanted to have my 2 dogs walked at the same time every day, what would something like that cost me?
Well, I usually base my prices off of time spent. So I offer a 30-minute walk and a 60-minute walk.
Okay.
My 30-minute walk is $16.50, which I think is more than fair, and that's a neighborhood walk that we would just kind of basically go along the dog's route, let them have a good sniff, a little potty break, and then we would take them back home. It's just a nice little break, especially for people that work long hours, or if they want to add that on to, say, a pet sitting service that I offer. So that's a great little break for them. So that's $16.50 for the 30 minutes. And then I have a 60-minute walk, which would be a little bit longer, a little bit more of interaction. And that's $25.50.
That's it. That seems very reasonable. Like, I understand there's not a lot of costs for you necessarily, say, out of pocket to provide the service, but for your time, I think that sounds pretty reasonable.
I think so as well. And it's a great way for, obviously, if you're working 8-hour shifts, it's a nice little break for your dog to get out and kind of sniff around and have a little bit of exercise at the same time, so he's not sat in the house all by himself.
Well, for sure. I saw, I think it was in January, you posted that you also offer discounts, like a 10% off for people who work in the pet industry, whether it's SPCA or it's a groomer or whoever it happens to be. Do you want to tell listeners about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I just kind of was thinking one day, and especially being a small business owner, and at the moment I work kind of by myself, so there's not a whole lot of support when it comes to like other pet industry. And I think they're a massive part of the community, huge part of the community. Obviously SPCA workers and dog rescue, that is huge for any animal welfare, and groomers and vet clinics and things like that. I just wanted to say thank you, really, because the work that they do is really appreciated, and obviously the community would be a very different place without them in it.
Oh, I agree. Now, I don't want to skew negative, because obviously it's a very positive service that you offer, and you do great work for animals and for their owners. But are there ever pets, and this is just me being curious, but are there ever pets that you have to say no to? Are there ever dogs with behavioral issues where you don't feel comfortable, or you really can't walk them on a leash, or are you the dog whisperer where you can work with really anybody?
Well, I'm hoping I am the dog whisperer. I have not come across a dog that I haven't been able to work with yet. But knock on wood that it stays that way. But again, pursuing, this is why I offer the one-on-one service. So I work with the dog. And then that's why the meet and greet for me is so important, just because it obviously makes, like, on both ends, it makes sure that the client has a good fit for their dog and that I have a good fit to take them on as a client. So we do our meet and greet before we start any services so that, you know, we can get to know each other and personalities and anything that I need to know about. But no, to answer your question, I have not come across that yet.
Well, that's good. We like to believe all dogs are perfect angels, but I got two myself, and I know sometimes at least one of them is the problem child. You know, can be a handful for sure. When you say meet and greet, I mean that's almost like a consultation. So a pet owner could contact you, say, hey, I've got a tortoise and a hare, and I'd like you to come meet them and make sure everybody gets along, and you're open to that.
Yeah, absolutely. And our meet and greet is obviously complimentary. So yeah, if you've got a hare or a pet boa or a goat or dogs and cats, I'm here. So we'll go into the home, get to know obviously the clients, their specific needs, what they're looking for, and any behavioral, dietary, and kind of figure out what their routine is. And then we'll cater our services to that.
And you serve sort of all areas within the town of Fort Erie, right? So Fort Erie, Ridgeway, Crystal Beach, Stevensville. Do you go anywhere else, or you pretty well stick to town here?
So for now, I'm sticking to town, but obviously I have big dreams. So hopefully we'll be in the future looking to expand our services throughout the entire Niagara region.
So for listeners who've heard, they say, okay, I've heard enough. I've heard enough from Courtney. I want to hire her right away. I want to get a hold of her. Where can people find you online? I assume online is the best way to go. Is it through your website or connect with you through social media? Do you want to kind of plug your handles and where people can find you?
Oh my gosh, absolutely. I would love to. So our website is www.gingertailspetservice.com. And then on all of the socials, and by all I mean Instagram and Facebook,
right,
because I haven't quite grasped the TikTok revolution yet. But I am Ginger Tails Pet Service across Instagram and Facebook for now. And then stay tuned, I guess, for TikTok if I feel inspired.
I'll say from experience, because I only got on TikTok last year, and it's not, I know it's intimidating when you start, especially because the demographic seems to skew so young. I feel like I'm competing with high school kids for attention. But once you get the hang of it, it's not that bad, I promise.
Oh my gosh. Oh, well, you might be my inspiration to give it a go.
Yeah, give it a try. You can't look sillier on TikTok than I do, that's for sure. So that's gingertailspetservice.com, Ginger Tails Pet Service on Facebook or I should say, and on Instagram. And is there a number you want to share with listeners where they could call and book you as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So my phone number is 905-994-3483.
Perfect. And on your website is a list of services and some testimonials and things like that. But one of the things that caught my attention on your website that I wanted to ask you about is right at the top, sort of in the header, you mentioned that you are insured, bonded, and pet CPR. And it's that third one that I thought was super, super duper interesting. So call me ignorant, but I had no idea there was such a thing as pet CPR.
Yes. Well, I am a safety girl. I've worked on boats for the last 10 years. So safety is number one priority when you work in that sector. And I kind of wanted to translate that over to any business that I got into. I think it ensures a little bit more trust. And yes, pet CPR is the thing. And I took a whole course on it, and I could easily save a pet's life if need be, which is really cool.
I'm just trying to...
St. John's Ambulance actually offers it. Sorry to cut you off.
No, I cut you off. I'm just trying to picture in my head. So you got a Frenchie on the ground and like you're giving it mouth to mouth. Like you can, is that
pretty much.
Really?
Yeah. Your whole mouth goes over their nose, and that's how you get the CPR going. And then it basically finds their heart, and you do the staying alive beat.
Well,
yeah.
I learned something new today. So, I mean, the mouth over the nose thing, one of my two dogs is a pug shih tzu mix. And he gets those reverse sneezing fits, dogs do with the very flat faces. And so I'm used to as gross as it is, you put your mouth over the nose and kind of, blow in. And so that is actually, am I halfway to being CPR trained?
You are halfway to being CPR trained, and every day is a school day.
If you can get over the dog boogers, you're all set, eh?
You're fine. You're fine. I'm sure you won't even think about it if that situation arose.
No, of course not. Of course not. But it's when you sit here thinking about it and it isn't a life or death situation, you're like, man, that's kind of gross, isn't it?
Yeah, a little bit, but you do what you got to do, you know?
It's, I got a toddler and 2 dogs in my house, so boogers are just part of our everyday life, right?
Yeah, exactly. So you'd be completely used to it. I don't even think it would faze you. You wouldn't even think twice about it.
No, probably not. You get more comfortable with body fluids. I feel like the older you get, it's just the way it works. But Courtney, is there anything else that you want to share with listeners before we wrap up?
I mean, no, I just kind of wanted to say thank you for creating this amazing space for the community. I've had to listen a few times to your podcast, and I think you've done something really wonderful. So thank you so much for having me.
Well, it's very kind of you. I appreciate you saying that, and thank you for spending some time with me today.
Oh, it's such a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Fort Erie Questions and Answers, based on the Facebook group by the same name.
Welcome to another edition of Fort Erie Questions and Answers. This is the part of the show where I go through the Facebook group by the same name and pick out any questions and answers that I thought were especially interesting or helpful, or maybe even amusing sometimes. Let's start with this one. Kathy asks, does anyone know what is going on at the Boys and Girls Club? I heard it closed. There's a saying, I don't know if it's popular or if it's just from the show Letterkenny, but it goes, bad gas travels fast in a small town. No, I don't know what the rumor mill is churning out, but no, the Boys and Girls Club did not close. Last week, the pool was closed temporarily due to some kind of mechanical malfunction. People with lessons got their money refunded. No real big deal. It's just that the pool was closed for a week. Broken pump or something along those lines. Let's see. Mike says, a few days ago, somebody made a post about Fort Erie property lines. Can they please repost? Well, through a whole series of comments back and forth on this one, what the original poster was actually looking for is the Geopedia site for Fort Erie. The address is myforterie.geopedia.ca, and you can get a pretty rough or approximate idea of property lines and zoning and that type of thing through this website. It's actually a very cool website. I use it quite a bit in my career in real estate. But what I will say is that if you are looking for accurate information about property lines, I can almost promise you the info that you get from Geopedia is not super duper accurate. It's not the same thing as getting a survey. Like if you wanted to sever a piece of land, the data that you get from Geopedia is not gospel. You're still going to have to get a survey, but it does give you a pretty good approximate idea. So somebody was able to get Mike that address, that website. So hopefully he got the answers he was looking for, and hopefully he's not putting too much stock in Geopedia. Anyway, let's see. Somebody says here, is Joe's Independent hiring? The grocery store. I'm looking for work on weekends. There was nothing on this one in the comments but snarky responses. Just unnecessarily snarky. I don't know why. One person said, I would try asking Joe's. Yeah, okay. I mean, I'm sure our original poster will make her way there, but for right now, she was just asking if anybody knows if Joe's is hiring. Another person said, showing up in person is a better way. For sure. Yeah, for sure. I'm sure all the employees in there would love nothing more than to stop what they're doing to answer your questions about employment. Somebody else said, just go fill out an application. Somebody else here said, I saw a now hiring poster at KFC. There were no good answers here. Nobody knows if Joe's Independent is hiring, but the good news is if you are on the hunt for a new job, I'll be covering Fort Erie job leads in just a moment. Let's see. Rick says, I see this beautiful new building in Fort Erie along the QEW called Abatement Technology with lots of employees' cars there. What do they do there? Well, the best response actually came from a previous employee who said, I used to work for them. They make a pretty wide range of things, actually. Parts for race cars, HEPA air filtration, negative air machines, industrial blowers, air care units for homes and hospitals, area containment units for hospitals, and a lot of other stuff. That is a really wide range of stuff. I mean, everything from hospital equipment to race car parts, all being built here in the town of Fort Erie. I think that's very cool. And a great question from Rick, by the way. Lots of good questions in Fort Erie questions and answers this week. It was hard to pick just a few. So anyway, Fort Erie, keep them coming and I'll keep sharing them.
Fort Erie job leads.
If you're on the hunt for a job, if you're looking to do something new, here are a few job leads that will hopefully point you in the right direction. Fort Erie Public Library, for starters, is hiring a Community Engagement Librarian, pays $31.19 an hour, oddly specific. It is a full-time job, but it is a fixed-term contract, only 10 months. The library offers extended health care, and a master's degree is preferred. I thought a master's degree was required to be a librarian, but what do I know? Let's see. There's a recruiting firm called Apple One, and they're looking for a Fort Erie-based cannabis packer. Now, being a recruiting firm, they don't specify where exactly you'd be working, but a quick search of the postal code they advertised, and it's that big old building on Jarvis Street between Robinson and Crook. So you'd be working there, warehouse-type setting. Pay is approximately $18 an hour. If you're interested, call Frank at 905-631-3333. Aerosafe Processing is looking for a lab tech. Pay is about $25 an hour, give or take. This is a permanent full-time position, weekdays, and includes some extended benefits. AGTA Home Health Care is looking for PSWs. Urgently, it says urgently, and it says you must live in Fort Erie. I find it strange that they urgently need PSWs when they're advertising 3 hours a week, 3 to 40 hours a week, all just depending. Flexible schedule, they call it, casual work. I don't know. If you are looking for maybe 3 hours a week urgently, then contact AGTA. Walmart is hiring for what they call administrative store support. They include the world's longest job description here. It might as well be a Stephen King novel. The only real qualification, if you scroll down the page, is that you have to be 16 or older. That's it. They do mention that the job opening is part-time. I think this title of admin store support, I think that's a fancy way of saying sales associate, but hey, I'm not sure. Maybe just walk into Walmart and fill out an application. That's probably the easiest way to do it. Employment Professionals Canada, the recruiting firm, they are looking for a full-time day shift administrative assistant to work here in Fort Erie. The pay ranges from $20 to $27 an hour. That's quite a spread, so I'm guessing it's based upon work experience. 32 to 40 hours per week. Says you must have a strong attention to detail and understanding of technology. If you're interested in this one, contact Pamela at 905-684-8222. And lastly, I'll mention this one. I think I mentioned it before. Buongiorno Bakery on Garrison Road, they're still looking for a food service supervisor. It says the minimal experience is required, less than a year. All you need is a high school diploma. It's 35 hours a week. Sounds like there's some early starts being a bakery and some weekends involved. You can apply for this one by sending an email to applypisc@gmail.com.
The Fort Erie Podcast.
Even though we face the difficulties of today and tomorrow, I still have a dream. Yeah. It is a dream deeply rooted in the American dream. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream.
That, of course, was part of the famous Martin Luther King I Have a Dream speech from August of 1963. And I got to be honest, I mean, there's just something, I don't know if it's the delivery, if it's the message he is delivering, if it's the context of the time, but there's something about that speech that gives me chills every time I hear it. Hey, not to be preachy or pedantic, not to stand on my soapbox, but take a moment this month to engage with Black history. That's what I'm encouraging you to do. Anyway, that's our show for today. Look out for episode number 84 next week. Subscribe to the Fort Erie Podcast on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. You might like streaming this show from the FortEriePodcast.com, and you could certainly do that. So why do I always tell you to subscribe? Well, because I can't always promise you that there'll be a new episode every Tuesday. I can't promise you that new episodes will always be on a Tuesday. So if you want to get notified when new episodes are released, subscribe somewhere where you will get notifications like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Amazon Music, you name it. Everywhere you can find podcasts, the Fort Erie Podcast is there. Get your messages in on the Byrd Box, any topic, any subject, 289 599-2973 or 289-599-BYRD, BYRD. Follow me on social media. I'm at Buy with Brent everywhere, at BUY with Brent, and I will chat with you again soon.
You've been listening to the Fort Erie Podcast with your host, Brent Jones. Never miss an episode. Subscribe on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, or visit theforteriepodcast.com.